Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Charles, and welcome you guys to another episode of the Dreamerspro Show, where we cover everything from sports, hot topics, classic debates, entertainment, and we give you guys a fresh perspective on things. And we see them. And today we got a pretty interesting show for you guys that we want you guys to stick around for. So please make sure you like the show and subscribe to the channel. If you hear some noise in the background, some people are doing something outside. Ain't nothing we can do about that. But anyway, let's get into this topic here. So as y'all know, recently Draymond Green went on the Uninterrupted platform, right? And he was on there. And they asked him to give his top 5 players of all time. And then the first 3, I can actually tell you the players he listed. He listed LeBron, Jordan, Kobe, Stephen Curry, and Shaq, right? Now, that list already had some people's blood boiling or whatever. But what really kind of irked a lot of people was the rationale he gave for creating that list. That's number one. And number two, he then started to go into this entire thing of how, you know, playing in today is so difficult. The skill level is just out of the, out of this world, blah, 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 blah. Now, apparently, Chris Broussard and Rob Parker from The Odd Couple, I guess they heard about that segment. So they decided to talk about it. And when Chris Broussard finally started to give his opinion on about the situation, he absolutely dealt with Draymond Green and basically gave him the raw reality about some of his views. So what we want to do is we want to play exactly what Chris Broussard had to say in response to Draymond Green, and then we'll come back and react to his comments. Take a listen to that there.
I just think when I look at what Draymond said, number one, I'm going to go here because Robbie says the talent is better. That's a weak argument. That's just saying everything gets better.
Right.
Which is not the case. Because Draymond, I'm sorry, you couldn't play center on a regular basis back in the 80s and the 90s. You couldn't. Patrick Ewing would have had his way with you.
No doubt.
David Robinson, Shaq, Olajuwon, Alonzo Mourning, they would have destroyed you.
You wouldn't have been able to play. And then, Chris, he would have had to go somewhere else and then make shots and be a threat. Do you know what I mean? Like he wouldn't be able to just clean up stuff.
And your boy, Kevon Looney, who's your starting center. I mean, you play center a lot, but he would have got worked by those dudes. I'm sorry. The game was different. Don't tell me it's better. Because back then, teams shared the basketball. Even Jordan was not a dribble. I'm going to create everything. No one did that back then. No, it was no Luka. Not because nobody could have been Luka.
They didn't play that way.
It was just 5-man basketball. And the handful of teams, including Golden State, that plays 5-man basketball today win. Even if they're not the most talented. Because 5-man basketball beats 1 or 2-man basketball, which is what most teams in the NBA play today. The thing, now I will say this, I think the players are more athletic in terms of running and jumping, more so jumping. Like you got more just freakish athletes in the league today than you used to have. And they shoot the 3 better, obviously. But that's about it. The dribbling is better, but they let you carry. They let you. There's this meme going around on Twitter right now, Rob, as we speak, about Ja Morant, who I love, and it is showing. And they could have picked Kyrie, they could have picked Ja, they could have picked Jordan Poole, they could have picked a couple of dudes from every team, and shown how often. Virtually every possession they carry. Do you know how much easier it is to handle the ball and shake somebody up when you can literally put your hand underneath the basketball and hold it there for a split second? I'm sorry, they didn't do that. We've always talked about how they let them travel a little. It was nothing like this. And so they shoot the 3 better now. That's it. And they're more athletic, but athleticism, if you don't understand how to play the game, it's not going to be the same impact. So I just think that argument is weak. And, I think Michael Jordan had no weaknesses. LeBron has very few, but one of them is free throw shooting. He's not terrible, but he's not very good from the foul line. Jordan was great from the foul line. Jordan, you say, well, he wasn't a great 3-point shooter. It wasn't a weakness. They didn't shoot the three that much back then. And I think everybody, and I don't want to, everybody, obviously, he would be a better 3-point shooter nowadays. We all understand that. But Michael Jordan just dominated the game at a level that nobody has ever done. Even Bill Russell, who won 11, he didn't dominate statistically, individually, the way Jordan did.
So you heard what Chris Broussard had to say there. First of all, I agree with him, right? And as a matter of fact, before we produced this particular show, we actually put up a number of polls on our channel, right? One of these polls, let me actually go to the polls here that we put up on our channel. The most recent poll was this. The poll was, what discipline requires more skill? We put playing in the post and ball and on the ball defending, or dribbling and shooting threes. Of the 300 people that voted, I'm sure many more. This poll has only been out for about 12 minutes. 75%, resounding 75% said playing in the post and on the ball defending. We also put up another poll right after that, and the question was: does lack of traveling calls in the NBA today allow players to become better ball handlers? Of the 100 people that voted, I'm sure thousands are going to vote by the time the show comes out. 67% said yes, 33% said no, and then we put up another poll a day ago that got a lot of engagement, and in that particular poll, we asked the question: what era of the NBA do you think it was the easiest to play in terms of scoring and, things like that? We put the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, and the present day. 27% of the people, of the 21,000 people that voted on this poll, said the 70s. But 60%, double of people that voted for the 70s, said the present day. And I believe that, Draymond Green may be basing his opinion on maybe saying, for example, LeBron James is the greatest player of all time, on the fact that he believes that this era is the most elite era in NBA history. I think most of us would disagree. I think the toughest eras to play in the NBA were the 80s and the 90s. That's what I believe. In the 80s and the 90s, man, you were basically playing football in the NBA. If you guys ever watched any highlights of those guys playing, or any game highlights, they were socking dudes across the head. For the simple fact that you can hand check in the NBA, right? That hand checking rule, where you can kind of guide a player's body, completely changed the way the NBA was played. And because of the spacing, guys can score a lot easier. Draymond Green recently was on a show. I think he was talking to Kyle Kuzma, where he basically put his own foot in his mouth without realizing it. And he basically said that I believe the 2017 Golden State Warriors team would dominate the 98 Chicago Bulls, although that was an older team, but whatever. I'm surprised. I wonder why he didn't pick the 96 Bulls. But anyway, and the reason for that was he said he's watching the series, and he was kind of astonished at the lack of spacing that the Bulls were playing with versus the spacing that they're playing with now. So Draymond, what system do you think predicates more scoring? A system with spacing or less spacing? The obvious one would be the system with spacing, because it allows for freedom of movement, right? It allows for that. So by you saying you can't believe that these guys were playing with that lack of spacing, then go sit down and ask yourself, how did MJ manage to average 30 points for his entire NBA career playing in that particular NBA? These guys, I don't believe, are really thinking this thing through thoroughly before they put their views out there, right? I just don't really think, now I think there are a certain amount of people out there that are saying that the NBA is better today because they're saying that players today are more athletic and they can run. I'm not really understanding what people are talking about when they say this. People, I don't know if people really spend enough time thinking before they speak. First of all, the human body can be conditioned to do a range of things. A range of things. You can be a long distance runner. Maybe that may be your discipline. But if you decide to train yourself to become a short distance runner, maybe somebody that sprints 60 yards, 100 meters, 100 yard dash. If you train your body and put it through the rigors, eventually your body will adapt to be able to do that. So I don't understand what you mean by, oh, players today are doing things that other players. The reason you're saying that is because they didn't do it. It wasn't because of their lack of ability to do it. It was because of how the game was played back then. The game had a slower pace in the 80s and the 90s. So obviously guys were running less. Guys weren't running up the floor trying to go for 2s and 3s. They would run and set up a half-court offense. So when people talk about these things, I wonder if people are really thinking this through. You say players today are more athletic. Okay, based on what evidence? How do you substantiate that claim? How? Some of the most athletic players in the NBA are, we have them in the present day and in the past. Players have been as athletic as they've ever been. You can say, well, look at a John Morant. Did you see the human highlight Dominique Wilkins? Did you see Dr. J play? Have you seen any Dr. J highlights? Who in the NBA is more athletic than Dominique Wilkins today? Players were athletic then, they're athletic now. What are we talking about here? So I don't think people are really thinking this thing through. What I think is happening is that people want their era to be the best. So therefore, they want to come up with as many reasons to make that be the case. And if you can kind of get the idea across that this is the greatest era ever, then you can now say the players in this era are the greatest ever, which is a bunch of nonsense. I can make an argument that some players are regressing. I could. You look at Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan at the age of 39 and 40 played 80 games, I believe, for both seasons. So how do you explain that when there's less medicine, less training, nutrition today is better, and logistics are better today in terms of travel? And you have load management. So how is that possible? We need to sit down and think before we talk. We really need to. I don't think people are spending enough time thinking about what they're saying. They're just so quick to put out an answer. People are saying, oh, today human beings are so much more advanced. No, they're not. They're not. What we have today are more devices that make us think less, use less of our brain. Some people say, well, how do you say that? Let me ask you guys a question. Someone building a skyscraper in 1940, okay, an engineer, an architect, these guys coming together, the developers, what do you think is more complicated? What skyscraper do you think is more complicated to build? A skyscraper in 1950 or a skyscraper in 2020? Let me ask you, what do you think? What about those engineers that had to do math with their hand on pen and paper? What about those guys? How do they do it? So please, let's think a little more before we talk. The brain power you have to use when you remove a calculator out of the equation, that alone should tell you why those guys back then arguably are smarter than people today. Why is it that our grandparents and our parents are tougher than we are today? Why is that? Because we have everything. We have everything, and usually everything is on your phone. You don't have to think. Now they want to come out with cars where people can't drive. This current generation has been pacified so much, but the comedy of it all, we feel like, oh, we're so much better. No, we're not. We're not. If you put this current generation, this present day generation, in the era where our grandparents grew up, we wouldn't make it. We wouldn't. So please spare me with this, oh, we're so much better, is a bunch of nonsense. This is just my personal opinion, and I have a right to that opinion. If some people disagree with me, please feel free to leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section. We catch you guys on the next show. Peace.